Good morning, everybody. So today we are on chapter 7, and this chapter is called Lend a Hand on the Land. I think we're probably going to find out what Cliff and Olive get up to now that they're at Queenie's. I wonder if they feel any happier today than they did yesterday when they arrived. Let's find out. Breakfast is for time wasters. We've got work to do, Queenie announced the next morning. She'd woken us up early. It wasn't yet light, and we were standing in the post office, washed and dressed and bleary-eyed, wondering what the heck was going on. After a restless night considering Suki's note, I decided to speak to Queenie as soon as I could. First, though, we simply had to eat. Don't worry, we can eat breakfast in 2 minutes flat, I assured her. Less than 2 minutes, added Cliff, but there was no sign of breakfast, not even a cup of tea. Queenie, I decided, was in league with the enemy. No one British would starve children like this. As for time wasting, I wasn't sure how she'd tell. The clock on the wall above the counter said 2:10 and was as dead as a doorknob. Yet, despite my reservations about Queenie, the shop itself looked normal. Rows of pigeonhole-type shelves to hold mail lined the walls. On the counter sat enormous weighing scales and a box displaying hair combs for sale. It was the sort of place that sold anything and everything. The stock stood at the very front of the shelves, hiding the empty space behind. There were tins, shoe polish, peas, pilchards, packets of soap flakes, dried beans, broken biscuits by the bag, and, I gulped hungrily, a glass-domed cake stand. On it were currant buns, yesterday's at least by the looks of them. As Cliff ambled over to inspect the buns, I seized my chance. I need to talk to you, Queenie, I said, dropping my voice, about my sister. She's got a boyfriend, and I think they might have been planning to run away and... Oh, good grief, Queenie interrupted sharply. Don't tell me Gloria is sending her here too. What? I was confused. No, I didn't mean... Oh, all right. One each, she called to Cliff, who, having lifted the dome off the cake stand, now had Queenie's full attention. I wanted to ask her what she'd meant about Suki. It was an odd remark to make about a friend, but the buns took over. True to our word, they didn't last 2 minutes. That morning I started my delivery job. In daylight, Budmouth Point looked prettier than I'd supposed. It wasn't a dump, like Esther had said. There was a school, a church, a baker's shop, a row of little white cottages set onto the hillside. Most of the larger houses were on the main street, which ran steeply down to a harbour. Behind it, perched at the end of a long cobbled wall, was the Lighthouse. I was to take groceries and post to those who, for whatever reason, couldn't collect it themselves. Cliff, being younger and weedier, was to help serve customers in the shop. Queenie made him wear an apron that fell to his ankles, while I had to carry a leather delivery bag. She told us that though today was our first day, she'd expect us to be as quick as the Jensen boys had been, because customers didn't want to be kept waiting. Before I went, she gave me 2 extra bits of advice. The first was, ignore people if they stare. It's the Budmouth way. I've lived here all my life and they still gawp at me like I'm an intruder. I wondered if it had more to do with her sweaters. And she added, if you've ever reason to be on the beach, don't go past the last groin. She meant one of those wooden fence things that ran out into the sea. Why not? Cliff asked. Quicksands. They'll swallow you whole before you've got a chance to even scream. It's far worse dead than drowning in the sea. So people say. Cliff's eyes went owl wide. Wow! As he turned to me, I guessed what he was about to ask. No, we're not going down there. Don't even think about it, I told him very firmly. Delivering was surprisingly hard work. By the end of the first day, my calf muscles ached like mad. But it was a great way to get to know the layout of the village. At supper, bread and dripping, only 1 slice each. Queenie told me I was indeed as fast as the Jensen boys. Then she left us to clear away, so I didn't get the chance to ask about Suki. After we'd done the dishes and were up in the attic by ourselves, I decided to show Cliff the coded note. We were sitting cross-legged on my bed. It was dark by then and the torch batteries were on the blink, but we could just about see the numbers and letters on the page. Cliff bent down over the note eagerly, though it gave me a bad feeling seeing it again, because I wasn't sure it had something to do with Suki's disappearance. "Tatty, isn't it?" Cliff remarked. "It got wet in the air raid," I explained. "What do you think it says?" It's not another love letter, is it?" he said, holding it at arm's length. "It's a funny sort of love letter if it is," I remarked. "Well, it's not telephone numbers," he said, "or place names." I didn't think so. Really, Cliff had no more of an idea than I did. "It's probably just a silly joke she had with one of her friends," I decided. Taking the note from him, I hid it at the very back of my sock drawer, though that didn't stop me troubling it. "You've an extra delivery today," Queenie told me on Friday, slipping a small package into the bag. "Chicken for Mrs. Drummond at 4 Salters Terrace. Tell her it's all I could get, though it might not be right." "That's at the very top of the village, isn't it?" I asked, just to check. As the week had gone on, I got to know my way around the back lanes and cut-throughs. I had the sense Queenie was getting used to us too. Begrudgingly and rather badly, she'd even started to cook for us. Yet apart from meal times, I didn't see that much of her. She'd either be in the shop or down in the cellar. When I tried asking about my sister, she stared at me blankly as if she'd forgotten who Suki was. Other times she'd cut across me with some delivery detail or job that needed doing. That Friday morning was a case in point. Mrs. Drummond would need to return yesterday's bacon. "All right, Dr. Morrison's housekeeper says she'll have it on her meat ration, so if you could take it there, please." Not wanting to carry it all the way round, I left Mrs. Drummond's delivery until almost last. The hill leading up from the village was long and steep, but well worth the climb. The view to the sea was spectacular from up there, and I walked the final steps backwards just to savour it. The lighthouse, painted in red and white stripes, looked like something from a fairground. Even without its lights on, it stood out for miles against the grey rocks and dark sea. But then, I suppose, that was the idea, which was why recently the German pilots had taken a liking to it. As they often did when I was tired, my thoughts took a funny turn. Perhaps like the lighthouse, there were people who were meant to stand out, who were made to be noticed and make a difference. It brought me slap bang to Suki. All week I'd savoured doing the delivery round as a time when my brain went blissfully blank, and yet back at Queenie's I'd looked at Suki's notes so many times the paper was wearing thin. It had to be a secret of some sort. Why else would it be written in code? I'd no idea. My sister had liked raspberry jam on toast, and I left long brown hairs in our sink that blocked the plug hole. She'd slept late on Saturdays, turned the wireless up loud when a dance tune came on. But when I thought of her now, it was like there was this whole other Suki I didn't know, and it frightened me. Taking a deep breath, I turned away from the sea. Salters Terrace was easy to spot. It was the last row of stone cottages in Budmouth Point. To my surprise and dismay, standing outside number 4 was Esther Jenkins. She was leaning against the wall, one leg tucked up behind her. Her face was blotchy, like she'd been crying again. I wanted to ask if she was all right, but she looked so awfully fierce I didn't have the nerve. "Can you give this to Mrs. Drummond, please?" I asked, hating how small I sounded. I held out the parcel of chicken. "Give it to her yourself," Esther said flatly. "The old witch is inside." I stared at her, appalled, but a little bit impressed. Then I noticed the suitcase on the doorstep, a school blazer and hat slung across it. "Are you staying here?" I asked. "Not if I can help it." "No," snatching up her things. Esther disappeared off down the hill. Mrs. Drummond came to the door almost straight away. I recognised her from the village hall the other night. She was the woman who'd stayed with Esther while she cried. That girl is impossible, she sighed, gazing past me into the street. Where's she gone? Did you see her? She went just off there. I wasn't sure what else to say. Here's your delivery from the shop, and Queenie says you can return yesterday's bacon. Right you are. 'Tis a shame to waste it. Taking the chicken, she turned to go back inside for the bacon, but something caught her attention and she froze. Listen to that, she said, finger raised. Planes. I frowned. Planes? What, like aeroplanes? German ones, I'll bet you. On their way to bomb poor Plymouth again. Mrs. Drummond was right. There, on the wind, was the unmistakable drone of aircraft. A familiar dread grew in the pit of my stomach. I'd better go, I said, and hurried away, anxious to find Cliff. And that's the end of our chapter. So now you can go and answer the questions on Kahoot. I look forward to seeing your answers.